Hey guys, tonight we are settling in to watch a lone longship slice through the glassy green-grey waters of a Norwegian fjord. We're watching you. Imagine the air, so crisp it feels like a physical presence against your cheeks, carrying the scent of pine, damp earth, and the faint, briny promise of home. You're on the deck, a seasoned Viking warrior, returning after years away. But something is different. Something is profoundly, fundamentally changed within you. And frankly, in this 10th century world of hard edges and harder loyalties, a change like the one you're carrying, well, you probably won't survive this. Not with your life, or at least your social life, intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, feel free to drop your location and what time it is for you down in the comments below. It's always so wonderful to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dragon head of your ship carves a silent ripple across the water's surface. It's a familiar sight, this prow, the painted eyes staring blankly forward, the intricate knotwork weathered by sun and sea. But today, the carving feels pagan. It feels like something from another life. Beneath the thick wool of your tunic and the heavy leather of your jerkin, a small wooden cross hangs from a simple cord against your chest. It's smooth from years of anxious handling, and at this moment, its weight feels more significant than the axe resting by your side. You are coming home, but you are bringing a foreign god with you, a stowaway in your very soul. For years, home was just a memory, a story you'd tell other warriors in the rowdy barracks of Miklagard, the great city the Franks call Constantinople. You'd served in the Emperor's own Varangian Guard, a life of gleaming gold and disciplined marches, a world away from this raw, untamed landscape. It was there, amidst the domed churches and the endless sea of people, that the whispers of the White Christ found you. At first, it was a curiosity, a story told by a Greek merchant, a prayer overheard from a palace servant. Then it became a quiet pull, a strange sense of peace in a faith that spoke of forgiveness, not of a glorious bloody death in battle. Your fingers traced the fjord's edge against the railing. You know every rock formation, every shadowed cleft in the towering granite cliffs. You know which peaks hold the snow longest into the summer and where the eagles like to nest. You can almost smell the wood smoke from your family's longhouse, a scent that is both a comfort and, now, a source of deep and gnawing anxiety. The landscape hasn't changed, but the way you see it has. These colossal cliffs, which once seemed shaped by the brawls of frost giants, now look to you like the deliberate, masterful work of a single, all-powerful creator. It's a bit jarring. It simplifies things, but it also strips away the familiar cast of characters, Thor, Odin, Freya, who populated this world for you since birth. It's almost a shame. You kind of miss blaming Loki for every time you misplaced your keys, or, in your case, your favourite helmet. The baptism was an awkward affair. The priest, a small man with worry etched into his face, had insisted on full immersion in a stone font that was clearly not built for a Norseman of your stature. You remember the cold shock of the holy water and the absurdity of two nervous Byzantine deacons trying to hold you under while you tried very hard not to look like you were drowning. Historians still argue whether these early conversions among Vikings were driven by sincere spiritual revelation, political maneuvering, or simply the economic pragmatism of fitting in with powerful new trading partners. For you, standing on this deck, the honest answer is a confusing soup of all three. You believed, yes, but you also saw how the Christian merchants received better terms, and how the emperor favored his Christian guards. Faith, you've learned, can be as much a tool as an axe. A few huts come into view, clinging to the shoreline. The smoke you smelled earlier is thicker now, a grey plume rising straight into the still air. Your family's lands. The main longhouse stands apart, its long sloping roof a dark line against the green backdrop of the forest. Figures are emerging, small at first, then larger as your ship glides closer to the beach. They are not waving. They are simply watching. Your heart, which has faced down Saxon shield walls and Slavic axemen without a flicker of fear, now hammers against your ribs with a rhythm of pure dread. The hull of the ship scrapes against the gravel of the beach with a low groan. The sound echoes in the sudden silence. The rhythm of the oars has stopped. The wind seems to have died down. It's as if the entire fjord is holding its breath, waiting to see what you will do. You grab your sea chest with one hand, your other hand instinctively, and quite unhelpfully. Hovering over the hidden cross, you try to arrange your face into a mask of casual homecoming, hoping you don't look like a man who has just brought a theological hornet's nest to a family reunion. As you swing your leg over the side and your boots crunch onto the familiar stones of your home, the small crowd of kinsmen parts slightly. In the centre stands your father. His hair and beard are whiter than you remember, braided with silver rings that glint in the pale northern light. His face is a stony map of your homeland, impassive and unreadable. He doesn't move towards you. He just stands there, his hand resting on the hilt of his own sword, and he waits. Your younger brother is there too, his expression a mixture of awe and what looks like suspicion. And your mother, she hangs back, her hands twisting in her apron, her eyes wide with 1,000 unasked questions. This is the moment. The years of pay, the exotic goods in your chest, the stories of the gilded city, all of that is secondary now. The primary truth is the invisible God you carry, and the silence from your family is your first clue as to how unwelcome he is. You give a slow nod to your father, your throat suddenly too dry to speak. You briefly wonder what the protocol is for this. Do you announce your newfound faith right here on the beach like a town crier with some very specific news? Or do you wait and just awkwardly refuse to toast to Odin at dinner later? You suspect it's the kind of thing that will come out one way or another, probably at the least opportune moment, like when someone asks you to bless the sacrificial goat. This is going to be a long evening. Your father's eyes, the same shade of grey as the fjord water behind you, rake over you from head to toe. There's no warmth in them, no spark of recognition for the son who was gone for a decade. It's the look a man gives a horse he's considering buying, assessing its strength, looking for any sign of weakness or defect. He finally gives a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Halvdan, he says. Your name sounds like a stone dropping into a deep well. It is not a welcome. It is a simple statement of fact. You exist. You are here. He then turns his gaze to the men on your ship, who are now beginning to offload chests and barrels. See that the goods are stored. The feast will be ready by nightfall. And just like that, the moment is over. He turns and begins the slow, deliberate walk up the path to the longhouse, his heavy cloak swinging with the rhythm of his gait. He hasn't asked if your journey was safe. He hasn't asked about the famed city of the Greeks. He has acknowledged your return and moved on to the logistics of the accompanying wealth. Your brother Eric hesitates for a moment, torn between running to you and following his father. He looks about 17 now, no longer the wiry boy you left behind. He's tall and broad, with the beginnings of a beard that he is clearly very proud of. He offers you a quick, nervous smile before scurrying to catch up, leaving you standing on the beach with your mother. She steps forward, and for a heart-stopping second, you think she will embrace you. Instead, her hands come up and gently touch the fabric of your tunic, a fine Byzantine wool dyed a deep, rich blue, so different from the rough, homespun wadmal of your kinsman. Her touch is a question. Her eyes, filled with a familiar and aching warmth, are another. "You are thin," she whispers, her voice a fragile anchor in this swirling sea of alienation. It's a classic motherly observation, true in every culture across time. No matter if you've been fighting for emperors or just living in the next town over, you're always too thin. You manage a small smile. It feels like cracking stone. "The food in the south is different," you reply, the understatement of the century. You fall into step beside her, following the men up the worn path. Every rock and root is an old acquaintance. You remember scraping your knee on that flat grey stone when you were 6, and hiding from Eric behind that thick, gnarled birch tree. The memories feel like they belong to someone else. As you walk, you notice the small details. Your father's beard, you see, is still immaculately braided, fastened with new silver clasps. It's a point of pride for him. Vikings, contrary to some popular belief, weren't just grubby marauders. Archaeological finds are full of combs, tweezers, and even tiny ear spoons. Hygiene was a thing. Looking at your father's impeccable grooming, you see it for what it is. A display of order, of tradition, of a man in control of his world. A world you no longer fully belong to. Entering the longhouse is like stepping back in time. The familiar sensory wave hits you, the thick smoky air from the long central fire pit, the smell of roasting pork, of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, of spilled ale soaked into the earthen floor, and the faint, musky scent of a large family living in close quarters. It's the smell of your childhood. It's the smell of a life you have outgrown. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the gloom. Light filters in poorly through the smoke hole in the roof and the doorways at either end. Along the walls, the faces of your aunts, uncles and cousins turn to watch you pass. They sit on the long wooden benches that line the hall, their work momentarily forgotten. Their silence is a heavy blanket. This isn't a hero's welcome. It feels more like a wake where you are the dearly departed. Your father has taken his place in the high seat, the large ornate chair in the middle of the long bench, carved with the heads of Odin's ravens, thought and memory. The symbolism is not lost on you. He sits there enthroned, the very embodiment of the old ways. He gestures to the seat of honor beside him, the place reserved for a celebrated guest. It feels like a test. You move toward it, your travel-worn boots strangely loud on the packed earth. You set your heavy sea chest down with a thud and take your seat. All eyes are on you. You can feel their curiosity, their suspicion. You're the local boy who went out into the big, wide world and has now returned. Changed. They can sense it even if they don't know the cause. It's in the cut of your clothes, the way you hold yourself, less of a brawler's stance, more of a soldier's discipline. You've brought the outside world into this insulated, self-contained universe, and they're not sure if they like it. An uncle, a large, red-faced man named Bjorn, with a beard that looks like a badger, has taken up residence on his chin, finally breaks the tension. He lifts his drinking horn. "So, Halfdan, tell us, did the pale men of the south teach you how to fight, or just how to wear their women's blouses?" A few nervous chuckles ripple through the hall. It's a classic Norse challenge, wrapped in a jest. He's probing your defenses, testing your nerve. You pick up the horn of ale left for you, its surface cool and familiar. You don't raise it yet. They taught me that a disciplined shield wall can break an undisciplined charge 9 times out of 10. You say, your voice even and calm, and they pay in gold, not just promises of Valhalla. The remark about Valhalla hangs in the air, a tiny seed of your new reality planted in the smoky soil of the longhouse. It's a subtle defiance, but it's there. The mention of gold, however, is a language everyone understands. The mood shifts slightly. Greed is a wonderful icebreaker. Whispers start to bubble up. The quiet scrutiny turns into a more open curiosity. But your father's expression remains unchanged. He simply watches you, his gaze steady and deep, as if trying to see past your eyes and into the strange, new landscape of your soul. Your mother has taken a seat further down the bench. She isn't spinning or weaving, she is simply watching, her hands still in her lap. Historians still debate the true extent of a woman's influence within the longhouse walls, whether she was merely a domestic manager or a powerful social arbiter. Looking at your mother's quiet, intense focus, you feel she holds more power in her stillness than Bjorn does with all his boisterous shouting. She is waiting. She is listening. The preparations for the feast continue around you. Women stoke the fire, men bring in more ale, and outside you hear the unfortunate bleating of a goat. The welcome feast. It would by tradition involve a blot, a sacrifice to the Aesir, the gods, an offering to thank them for your safe return. An animal would be consecrated to Thor or Odin, its blood sprinkled over the assembled family and the walls of the longhouse as a blessing. And then you would all feast on its meat. A simple, profound ritual you have participated in your entire life. Until now. Your hand, almost of its own accord, slips beneath your tunic to touch the small wooden cross. It's just a piece of wood, but it represents a line you cannot, will not, cross. The goat bleats again, a desperate final sound. The real welcome, you understand, hasn't even begun. The great iron cauldron hanging over the central fire bubbles away, filling the longhouse with the rich, savoury scent of boiling meat and root vegetables. The goat has been dispatched, its life given in offering for your safe return, a detail that now makes your stomach clench with a discomfort that has nothing to do with hunger. Trestle tables have been set up down the length of the hall, laden with coarse flat bread, bowls of skyer, a thick tangy yogurt, and platters of smoked fish. Drinking horns ranging from simple cow horns to ornate, silver-rimmed monstrosities are being filled and passed down the benches. The atmosphere has thawed considerably. Your talk of Byzantine gold has acted like a warm spring sun on a frozen field. Cousins who had been eyeing you with suspicion now slap you on the back, asking boisterous questions about the size of the Emperor's palace and the legendary ferocity of his guards. You answer them in measured tones, editing your stories on the fly. You speak of the incredible hippodrome and the chariot races, of the massive chain that guarded the Golden Horn, of markets overflowing with silks and spices. You leave out the parts about the serene quiet of the Hagia Sophia at dawn, or the calm intellectual debates you overheard between Greek priests. You are curating your past, presenting a version of yourself that is more palatable, less foreign. It's exhausting work. It's like translating a language in real time, not from Greek to Norse, but from your new reality back to your old one. You find yourself smiling and nodding, even managing a chuckle at one of Bjorn's cruder jokes about Frankish women. You are playing the part of Halfdan, the Viking warrior, but the costume feels ill-fitting. Then the moment arrives. It unfolds with the slow, inevitable gravity of a landslide. Your father rises from his high seat, a large, ceremonial drinking horn in his hand. Silence falls over the longhouse once more, thick and expectant. Even the dogs chewing on bones under the tables seem to go still. "We thank the gods," your father's voice booms, resonating in the smoky space. "We thank Thor for the strength that brings a son home. We thank Odin for the wisdom to guide our family. And we thank Freya for the bounty on our tables." With each name he pauses, allowing the power of the words to settle. His eyes are fixed on you. This isn't just a toast. It's a reaffirmation of loyalty, a pledge of allegiance to the gods of your ancestors. "For your safe return, Halfdan," he continues, "we have made this offering." A serving man steps forward, holding a shallow wooden bowl. In it is the blood of the sacrificed goat. It is dark and viscous. The man is holding a hlautine, a sacrificial twig, a small bundle of fir sprigs bound together. He dips the twig into the bowl and approaches your father, who holds out his hands. The man sprinkles the blood over your father's hands and his forehead. Then he moves to your Uncle Bjorn and then down the line. Each person receives the blessing, some nodding solemnly, others grinning. The dark red drops a stark contrast against their skin. You watch the twig come closer and closer. It's a macabre countdown. With each person sprinkled, the knot in your stomach tightens. You see it land on your brother Eric, who, puffing out his chest, accepts the blessing with a seriousness that is almost comical. He is so eager to be seen as a man, a true Norseman. Then the serving man is standing in front of you. He dips the twig into the bowl, the fir needles slick and dark. He looks at you expectantly. The entire hall is watching. You can feel their gazes like a physical weight. Your father's eyes are like chips of flint. This is the test you knew was coming. It's not about gold or stories of far-off lands anymore. It's about this blood, these gods. You take a slow breath. Your heart is a frantic drum against your ribs. You cannot do it. The Christ you met in Constantinople, the God of forgiveness and a single loving Father, would not sanction this. Worshipping another God, participating in a blood sacrifice. It's the one line that is absolute. Slowly, deliberately, you shake your head. A barely perceptible movement. But in the charged silence of the longhouse, it is as loud as a thunderclap. You then make the sign of the cross over your food, a small, almost surreptitious gesture you learned from a Greek friend. But there is nothing surreptitious about it in this hall. It is an alien symbol, a defiant mark of otherness. A collective gasp, a rustle of movement, a dozen muttered curses. The serving man freezes, the blood-soaked twig hovering in the air between you. He looks utterly bewildered, as if you'd suddenly started speaking in the tongue of birds. Uncle Bjorn is on his feet, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "What is this?" he roars, pointing a sausage-like finger at you. "What insult is this to the gods, to this house?" You don't look at Bjorn, you look at your father, His face is impassive, a mask of stone, but you see a flicker in his eyes. It's not anger, not yet. It is something deeper, a cold, hard disappointment. You have not just refused a ritual, you have publicly shamed him. You have declared in the clearest possible terms that his gods are not your gods. It is not an insult, you say, your voice steadier than you feel. It is another way. The god of the southern lands forbids such offerings. You refer to it as the god, singular. Another small but monumental detail. The mention of a single god is met with derisive laughter from some quarters. One god, Bjorn sneers. Who would be so foolish? Does this one god give you strength in battle and make the crops grow and fill the nets with fish? Our gods have better things to do than to handle everything themselves. They delegate. It's a surprisingly decent bit of theological reasoning from Bjorn, you have to admit. A quirky tidbit of Norse belief is that their pantheon often functioned like a well-organized company, with each deity handling their own department. The idea of a single deity being responsible for everything struck them as inefficient, even a bit arrogant. But your father is not laughing. He raises a hand and the hall falls silent again. You follow the white Christ, he says. It is not a question, it is a diagnosis. You nod, just once. I was baptized in Miklagard. The admission hangs there, stripped of any context, any explanation. It's a stark, brutal fact. You have abandoned their ways, their entire cosmology, for the god of the people they sometimes fight, sometimes trade with, but always view as other. You've crossed the aisle. Your mother's face is pale. Her hands are now clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles are white. She stares at your father, a look of desperate appeal in her eyes. Historians still argue about this period, a time known as the Clash of Faiths. It wasn't a clean, overnight transition. For centuries, the old ways and the new faith existed side by side, sometimes peacefully, sometimes in violent conflict. Families were torn apart, villages were split. You are living at the sharp, cutting edge of that historic friction, and your family's longhouse is the epicenter. The personal cost of this great historical shift is playing out right here, on these trestle tables, over lukewarm goat meat and spilt ale. Your father picks up his horn and takes a long, slow drink of ale. He sets it down with a soft click. He doesn't look at you. He looks out over his family, at the anxious, confused faces of your kinsmen. The feast is for Halfdan's return, he says, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Let us eat. He picks up his knife and begins to carve the roast. The command is clear. The conversation is over. You have not been cast out. You have not been struck. You have been ignored, erased from the ritual. You are here, but you're not with them. The long-awaited feast has finally begun, but for you, it feels like you're eating alone in a hall full of ghosts. The rest of the feast unfolds in a strange, muted key. The initial burst of anger from your Uncle Bjorn fizzles into a sulky, brooding silence. He keeps shooting you dark looks from down the table, occasionally muttering into his drinking horn about godless soft bellies from the south. But your father's command holds sway. The family eats. They talk, but the boisterous energy from earlier is gone, replaced by a strained and cautious civility. They talk around you. They discuss the coming harvest, a dispute with a neighboring clan over timber rights, the health of the cattle. It's as if a large, invisible boulder has dropped into the middle of the longhouse, and everyone must now carefully navigate their conversations around it. That boulder, of course, is you. You sit in your seat of honor, a paradox of presence and absence. You chew on your bread and smoked fish, avoiding the goat meat that circulates on wooden platters. No one comments on it, but you see their eyes flicker to your empty plate, then away again. Your brother Eric, seated across from you, looks deeply conflicted. He keeps opening his mouth as if to ask a question, then closing it again, his gaze darting between you and your father. The poor boy is caught in the cross currents of his hero worship for the much-travelled older brother and his ingrained fear and respect for the powerful patriarch. He is a living embodiment of the community's confusion. As the evening wears on and the ale flows more freely, the tension eases into a more manageable, if slightly melancholic, atmosphere. A scold, an old man with milky white eyes and a long flowing beard, is called forward. He takes up a small harp, and the longhouse grows quiet again, ready for a story. You remember this part of the evening with fondness from your youth. The scold's voice, a gravelly but melodic instrument, weaving tales of gods and heroes, of great battles and cunning tricks. He begins to chant a familiar lay, a story of Thor's fishing trip to catch Jörmungandr, the world's serpent. You watch the faces of your family, illuminated by the flickering firelight. They are captivated, transported by the ancient words and rhythms. They nod along as Thor hurls his hammer. They laugh at the giant Hymir's fear. They are unified in this shared story, this collective cultural memory. And for the first time you feel completely, utterly outside of it. The story is no longer a foundational myth. It's just a story. A fairy tale about a strong god and a big snake. The magic has been broken for you, and its loss leaves a hollow ache in your chest. You are not the only one who seems detached. Your mother, you notice, slips away from the bench and out through a side exit, a quiet shadow disappearing into the night. A few minutes later, you murmur an excuse about needing some air and follow. You find her standing by the shoreline, a lonely silhouette against the starlight reflected on the fjord. The air here is clean and cold, a welcome relief from the smoke and suffocating tension of the longhouse. "You have shamed him," she says without turning around. Her voice is not accusatory, just full of a deep, bottomless sorrow. He sees it as a betrayal of everything he has built, everything we are. "I did not mean to shame him," you say softly, standing a respectful distance away. "But I could not lie." "You could have pretended," she says, finally turning to face you. Her eyes are luminous in the faint light. "For one night, for the sake of peace in the family." This is a classic dilemma, the choice between public conformity and private conviction. A mainstream historical fact of the Viking Age conversion period is that many early Christian Norsemen did exactly this. They maintained a public-facing observance of the old rites to keep the peace. King Haakon the Good, himself a Christian, was famously pressured by his chieftains to participate in pagan feasts. He managed to get away, with just making the sign of the cross over his horn, claiming he was blessing it to Thor. A clever, politically astute workaround that you, in your straightforwardness, failed to deploy. "The priest who taught me said a lie in matters of faith is a sin against God and your own soul," you reply, the words feeling formal and alien on your tongue. Your mother shakes her head, a small, sad gesture. "This white Christ of yours, he sounds very demanding, and he does not seem to understand how families work." And there it is, the chasm between your two world views laid bare in the simple, pragmatic observation of a mother. As you stand there in the quiet night, a figure detaches itself from the shadows near the longhouse and walks tentatively toward you. It's your young cousin, a boy of about 14 named Leif. He is your aunt's son, a boy you barely remember. He stops a few feet away, clutching something in his hand, looking nervous. Halvdan, he whispers, as if the name itself is forbidden. Your mother gives a slight nod, a silent permission, and steps back towards the longhouse, leaving you alone with the boy. They say you were baptized, that you saw the great churches of the south. His eyes are wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Is it true that their God is the only one? This is unexpected. You had anticipated anger, suspicion, even open hostility. You had not anticipated secret, whispered curiosity. It is what I believe, you say carefully. The Emperor himself bows to this god. All the great men of Miklagard. You intentionally link the faith to power and prestige, a currency the boy would understand better than theological grace. He nods slowly, processing this. My father says you are a fool, and that the Aesir will punish you. He says they will sink your ship or wither your arm. They haven't yet, you reply with a small smile. Leif then looks around furtively, as if to make sure no one is watching, before opening his hand. In his palm is a small, crudely carved wooden bird. I made this, he whispers. I'm not a good carver. Not like my father. He gets angry when my work is not perfect. He looks down at the bird, his shame palpable. The priests you spoke of, would their God be angry at a carving that is not perfect? The question is so simple, so innocent, it catches you completely off guard. It's a profound theological inquiry disguised as a boy's insecurity. You think of the lessons you learned in Constantinople, the stories of a forgiving Christ, of a God who cared for the humble, the meek, the imperfect. No, Leif, you say gently. He would see the heart that made it. He would value the effort, not the perfection. A strange look crosses the boy's face, a flicker of hope, of relief. It's a powerful idea in a world governed by strength, honor, and outcome. A God that grades on effort, not results. This is the promise of Christianity that so appealed to the common folk of Europe. It offered a spiritual refuge for those who were not mighty warriors or powerful chieftains. And right here, in this hushed conversation by the fjord, you see that appeal taking root. This is a quirky, fringe tidbit of history in action. How faith spreads not always through sweeping royal decrees or epic battles, but through quiet, personal conversations, addressing the intimate fears and hopes of individuals. The boy, Leif, nods, closes his hand around the little wooden bird, and without another word, turns and scurries back into the darkness. You stand there for a long time, the cold air seeping into your bones. Your dramatic act of defiance at the feast had created a public rift, an uncrossable chasm, but it also paradoxically opened a door, a small one in a dark corner, but a door nonetheless. You have been branded an outsider, an apostate, a source of shame, but you have also become something else, a source of whispered curiosity, a beacon for those, like young Leif, who might be quietly questioning the old certainties, looking for a God who might not demand perfection. The thought offers you little comfort, but it offers you a sliver of purpose. You are a lightning rod, and the storm is just beginning. Section 5. The days that follow your arrival settle into a strange and quiet routine. You exist within your family's lands, but not truly as part of them. You are a ghost at the long table, a silent presence by the fjord. The strained politeness of the first night solidifies into a kind of functional avoidance. Your father speaks to you only when necessary, in clipped formal tones, usually about the disposition of the trade goods you brought back. The gold and silks from Miklagard are thankfully universally understood and appreciated. Wealth, it seems, transcends theological divides. Your kinsmen, following your father's lead, are civil but distant. They no longer ask for stories of the South. The subject of your faith is a locked room in the center of the longhouse that everyone pretends isn't there. You spend your time walking. You trek the familiar paths of your youth, through the pine forests that blanket the slopes of the fjord, up to the high pastures where the wind bites and you can see for miles. The landscape is both a comfort and a constant reminder of the change within you. Where you once saw the domain of land spirits and elves, you now see only the majestic, silent handiwork of a singular creator. The wind whistling through the peaks is no longer the breath of a frost giant. It's just wind. There is a loneliness in this new perspective, a sense of disenchantment. You have traded a world rich with personality, a world where every rock and stream had a story, for one of stark, sublime emptiness. It's beautiful, yes, but it's a solitary kind of beauty. Your most consistent companion is your brother, Eric. He seeks you out, often under the pretense of training. He brings a pair of training swords and shields down to the beach, and you spar. He is strong and eager, full of the reckless aggression of youth. You, with your years of disciplined Varangian training, easily parry his wild swings, disarm him, and send him tumbling into the sand. You use these sessions to teach him what you learned in the South, the importance of footwork, of guarding one's center, of fighting with your head and not just your rage. A battle is not a temper tantrum, you tell him, tapping his shield to correct his stance. It is a piece of work. You do it efficiently, and you come home alive. He listens, absorbing the practical advice, but you know what he really wants to ask. The questions finally spill out of him one afternoon, as you sit on an overturned boat, catching your breath. This god of yours, he starts, not looking at you. Is he stronger than Thor? It's the quintessential Viking question. Strength is the ultimate virtue. Divine power is measured in might. You consider your answer carefully. He doesn't fight with a hammer, you say slowly. His strength is of a different kind. It is the strength of a mountain that stands still while the storm breaks against it. It is the strength of the sun that rises every morning, no matter how dark the night was. Eric frowns, trying to wrap his mind around this. It's abstract, poetic. It's not the tangible, hammer-swinging power he understands. But if a warrior prays to him before a shield wall, he insists, will he protect him? Will he guide his axe? He protects the soul, you reply. He offers a place of peace after death that isn't reserved only for warriors who die in battle. This is the core of it. Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, was an exclusive club with a very specific and rather violent cover charge. Christianity's promise of a heaven accessible to all, warrior, farmer, woman, child, the sick and the lame, was a revolutionary concept. It democratized the afterlife. Your words hang in the air between you. Eric doesn't seem convinced, but he is intrigued. The seed of a different kind of strength, a different kind of reward, has been planted in his mind. You find you are no longer just Halfdan the warrior. You are becoming Halfdan the reluctant theologian, the accidental missionary. More secret visitors find their way to you. A woman whose child is sick approaches you near the forest's edge, asking if the white Christ is a god of healing. She's heard stories from traders about priests who can cure the sick with a prayer. An old man, a thrall who works your father's fields, asks you if it's true that in the eyes of your God, a slave and a king are the same. Each time you do your best to explain the concepts you barely grasp yourself. Grace, forgiveness, universal love. You share the parables you remember the priests telling, simplified and filtered through your own Norse understanding. You have no holy books, no vestments, no authority but your own experience. You are making it up as you go along, a one-man fringe movement operating in the shadows of your own home. One evening, your mother seeks you out. She brings you a bowl of stew, finding you in the small outbuilding where you've chosen to sleep, away from the main longhouse. She sits with you in the quiet, watching you eat. They are talking, she says, the whispers. You are unsettling things, Halfdan. She says it not with anger, but with a weary resignation. Bjorn wants your father to cast you out. He says you are poisoning the community with foreign ideas, turning the children and the servants against their masters and their gods. And my father, what does he say? You ask, your spoon hovering over the stew. He says nothing, she replies, and that is the most terrifying answer of all. He watches. He listens. He is waiting to see which way the wind will blow. Historians still debate the motivations of chieftains during this transitional period. Was their eventual conversion driven by grassroots pressure from below? A top-down command for political gain, or a genuine change of heart? In your father's silence you see that debate personified. He is a practical man, a leader. He is weighing the cost of tradition against the potential and still unknown benefits of a new path. Your presence, your quiet, persistent faith has turned his fjord into a laboratory for cultural change. You are living 1 foot in each world, and it is a painful, precarious balance. You are a Norseman by blood, by language, by every scar on your body. You love these people, this land. But you are also a Christian, a brother in faith to the men you served with in the south, a follower of a God who seems to promise a bigger, more inclusive world. You are a bridge, and being a bridge means being pulled in 2 directions at once. You cannot go back to being the man you were, but you are not yet sure what you are to become. You finish your stew and thank your mother. As she leaves, she pauses at the door. Be careful, my son, she whispers. A man who stands in the middle of a river can be swept away by the current from either side. You are left alone in the quiet of your small hut. Through the open door, you can see the stars beginning to appear over the dark silhouette of the fjord. They are the same stars that sailors have used for centuries, the same stars the Skalds sang of. But tonight, they look different to you. Less like divine campfires, and more like distant, silent witnesses. Your return home was not the end of a journey. It was the beginning of a much stranger and more difficult one. You have survived the sea, the shield wall, the politics of an emperor's court. Now you must survive the quiet, loving and deeply wounded world of home. You lie back on your cot, one hand resting on the small wooden cross beneath your tunic, a lonely outpost of a new kingdom in a land that is not yet ready for it, and you wait for the dawn. The laundress and the king's blood. The cold comes up from the river first. It's a damp, insistent chill that seeps through the thick soles of your worn-out shoes, travels up your ankles, and settles deep into the marrow of your bones. before your eyes are even truly open, before the city of Paris has decided to properly wake itself, you feel the Seine. You're already at work. Your world is wood and water. You stand on the floating platform of a bateau lavoir, a laundry boat tethered to the riverbank. All around you, the air is thick with steam rising from massive copper cauldrons of boiling water, a man-made fog that mingles with the grey morning mist. It smells of lye, wet wool, and the faintly metallic scent of the river itself, a scent that carries the city's every secret and sin. This is your office, your kingdom, your purgatory. Your knuckles are a bruised and angry red, chapped raw by the endless cycle of plunging, scrubbing and wringing. You lift the battoir, a heavy wooden paddle, its surface worn smooth by years of use, perhaps even by your own mother's hands before you. With a rhythmic thwack, 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 you beat a linen sheet against a sloping washboard. Each impact sends a spray of icy water onto your apron. You barely feel it anymore. It's just part of the rhythm, like a heartbeat. The thud of wood on wet cloth, the slosh of the grey water, the low murmur of the other women beside you. This is the soundtrack of your life. These floating laundry houses are a cornerstone of Parisian life. Every piece of fabric in the city, from a duke's silken waistcoat to a baker's flour-dusted apron, eventually finds its way here, to the river's edge. It is a grueling, back-breaking profession, but one with an unspoken power. For here, among the suds and the steam, information is the real currency. Whispers and rumours are traded more freely than coins. You learn more about the goings-on at the Tuileries Palace by scrubbing a guardsman's tunic than you ever would from reading the official gazettes. It's the 18th century equivalent of a morning news podcast, just with a much greater chance of catching typhus. Today the whispers are different. They are hushed, sharp and nervous. The usual gossip about which merchant is cheating on his wife or whose daughter is mysteriously visiting the countryside for a few months has been replaced. Now, the names on everyone's lips are Robespierre, Danton, Marat, and of course the name that is now spoken with a strange mix of pity and contempt, Citizen Capet, the man who, until recently, was King Louis XVI. They say the vote was close, breathes Elise, a woman with a perpetually worried face as she twists the water from a heavy blanket. Almost half the deputies didn't want the final thing. She doesn't say the word. No one does. But it hangs in the steam around you all. The guillotine. That new, horribly efficient invention of Dr. Guillotin, who only wanted to make executions more humane. A grim sort of joke the universe has played. You just grunt in response, not wanting to get drawn in. Politics is a dangerous game. Your focus is on the stubborn, wine-coloured stain on this particular sheet, likely from some aristocrat's careless feast months ago. A ghost of a party you could never dream of attending. You wonder briefly if this linen belonged to someone who has since fled the country, or worse, someone who has had a fatal encounter with the new republic's sense of justice. Most of your clients these days are a little less noble. It's one of the few tangible benefits of the revolution. Fewer delicate silks, more sturdy cottons. You pause for a moment to rub a foul-smelling balm onto your hands. It's a concoction of tallow and herbs you buy from the corner apothecary, a quirky little personal expense. It promises to protect your skin, though mostly it just makes your hands greasy and smell faintly of disappointment and sheep. You press on, scrubbing harder at the ghostly stain. The chatter continues. A newer, younger laundress repeats a story she heard from her cousin, a baker's boy, about the king in his prison, that he has grown fat, that he spends his days reading and teaching his son, simple, domestic things that sound bizarre when you think of who he is, or who he was. And it's here, amidst the mundane work and the extraordinary news, that a certain debate plays out in miniature. Historians still argue whether the networks of working women like you, the laundresses, the fishwives, the market sellers, were a genuine political force in the revolution, or if you were all just a kind of collective echo chamber for the city's anxieties. As you listen to the news spread from one end of the boat to the other, mutating slightly with each telling, you don't feel like a political activist. You just feel cold and tired and deeply, deeply curious. The fate of a king is, if nothing else, a captivating bit of drama. It's certainly more interesting than scrubbing out mutton grease. Suddenly a boy comes running along the riverbank, waving a pamphlet. He shouts the news to anyone who will listen, his voice cracking with youthful excitement. It's decided. January 21st, the Place de la Révolution. A silence falls over the laundry boat. The rhythmic thwacking stops. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound is the gentle lapping of the Seine against the wooden hull and the distant clatter of a cart on a cobbled street. The news is no longer a rumour, it's a date. An appointment the whole nation will keep. Elise makes the sign of the cross over her chest. The young laundress gasps. You just stare down at the linen in your hands, the reddish stain. You feel a strange, cold certainty settle in your stomach, a sense of history unfolding not in the grand halls of government, but right here, in the cold water of the river, among the common and the forgotten. The work resumes, but the rhythm is broken. The conversation is gone, replaced by a shared, unspoken tension. You finish your last load as the winter sun begins to set, casting a pale, watery light over the city. You collect your meagre pay and begin the long walk home, your muscles aching, the scent of lye clinging to your clothes. The streets of Paris feel different tonight. The familiar shadows seem longer. The cries of street vendors have a sharper edge. And you find yourself thinking a rather absurd thought. After they do it, someone will have to wash the executioner's clothes. You hope, for their sake, that he's a tidy professional. January 21st dawns with a bone-deep cold that has nothing to do with the river. It's a dry, biting freeze that finds every crack in your apartment's old window frames. There will be no work on the Bateau Lavoir today. The entire city is holding its breath. For what, exactly, no one is entirely sure. A birth, a death, an exorcism. You pull your wool shawl tighter around your shoulders. You aren't a fervent revolutionary shouting for blood in the political clubs. Nor are you a secret royalist, weeping into your handkerchief for the Lord's anointed. You are a Parisian. And this is the biggest event to happen in your city in living memory. To miss it would be like sleeping through your own wedding or your own funeral. So you go. The streets are different. The usual morning symphony of bakers' shouts, rattling cartwheels and fishwives' songs is replaced by a low, humming silence, punctuated by the rhythmic tramp of marching feet. Companies of the National Guard are everywhere, their bayonets fixed, their faces stern and impassive. They line the route from the Temple prison to the square, a human wall to prevent any attempted rescue, or perhaps just to prevent chaos from spilling over. Walking through Paris today is like navigating a poorly organized parade route, where everyone is a nervous spectator. As you get closer to the center, the quiet dissipates, replaced by the sound of people. a vast, murmuring sea of them, all flowing in the same direction, drawn by a grim, collective gravity. The crowd is a thick stew of humanity, stern-faced men in the red Phrygian caps of the sans-culotte, women clutching the hands of their children, morbidly curious aristocrats in disguise, and people like you, caught somewhere in the middle. Here and there, hawkers move through the throngs, selling crude pamphlets depicting the king's downfall and, even morbidly, little meat pies. A snack for the show, the 18th century equivalent of popcorn at the movies if the movie ended with a profound national crisis. You finally spill out into the Place de la Révolution, and the sheer scale of it makes you stop. The square is immense, a great open wound in the heart of the city. In the centre of it all, stark against the grey sky, stands the guest of honour. The guillotine. It's taller than you imagined, a simple, brutalist piece of engineering. 2 tall grooved posts, a heavy crossbeam, and at the top, the star of the show, the gleaming angled blade. It catches what little light there is, a sliver of malevolent silver. The ground around its base is covered in fresh sand, a detail you, as a cleaner of things, appreciate with a kind of dark, professional courtesy. Easier to soak up the mess. You find a spot on the far side of the square, near the plinth, where a statue of the king's grandfather, Louis XV, once stood. Your view is partially obscured by shoulders and hats, but it's the best you can do without being crushed. The air is thick with anticipation and the smell of thousands of unwashed bodies pressed together. You wait and wait. The Parisian talent for waiting has been finely honed during this revolution. You wait in bread lines, you wait for news, you wait for trials. Today you wait for a king to die. It feels, quite frankly, inefficient. Around 10 o'clock, a rumble goes through the crowd. It begins at the edge of the square and builds to a roar. The carriage has arrived. It is a simple, green-painted affair, drawn by 2 horses. It stops at the foot of the scaffold. You crane your neck, standing on your toes, trying to see. A figure emerges. He is dressed simply, in a brown coat. From this distance, he doesn't look like a king. He looks like a man. Charles-Henri Sanson, the executioner, and his assistants approach him. You see a brief negotiation. Later, you'll hear the story, already becoming a part of the city's instant mythology, that Louis refused to have his hands tied, seeing it as the ultimate indignity, and only acquiesced when his priest convinced him it was one last sacrifice, an imitation of Christ. They lead him up the short flight of wooden steps. The crowd becomes utterly, unnaturally silent. You can hear a baby crying somewhere off to your left, a thin, lonely sound in the vast, expectant hush. Once on the platform, Louis walks to the edge. He tries to speak. You can't make out the words, but you see his mouth moving, his hands gesturing to the crowd. He looks firm, resolved. I die innocent of all the crimes imputed to me, is what the pamphlets would later claim, he said. I pardon the authors of my death, and I pray God that the blood you are about to shed will never fall upon France. Whether he said this or not, few heard it, because at that moment the commander of the National Guard, Antoine Joseph Santerre, raises his sword, a signal. A massive rolling thunder of drums erupts, a calculated cacophony designed to drown out any last words from the condemned. It's a raw, brutal, and effective piece of stage management. The king's voice is swallowed by the noise. His final moments are a blur of professional activity on the scaffold. There is no struggle. They have already cut his hair short at the neck, a practical consideration for the executioner, ensuring a clean pass for the blade. This haircut would become a grimly fashionable style for a time among some revolutionary women, known as the coiffure à la victime. A strange and telling historical footnote. They guide him to the bascule, the plank. They position his neck in the lunette, the crescent-shaped stock. Sanson pulls the rope. You don't really see the blade fall, it's too fast. You see the crowd react. A gasp, a collective intake of breath, then a moment of silence. One of Sanson's assistants lifts the head from the basket, holding it aloft by the hair for all four sides of the square to see. And then the cry comes, Vive la République! It starts with one voice, then a dozen, then 100, until it's a roar that washes over the square. But listening closely, you can hear more than just revolutionary joy. Historians still argue whether the cheer was a spontaneous burst of Republican fervor or something else entirely. A great collective exhalation of breath, a release of unbearable tension that had gripped the nation for months. It sounds to you like both joy, relief, fear, and a dawning, terrifying uncertainty all tangled up in one great shout. The spell is broken. The human dam bursts. The crowd, which had been a single stationary organism, disintegrates into thousands of individuals. People begin to move. Some push forward toward the scaffold, a strange pilgrimage. Others, looking pale and shaken, push their way out, eager to be gone. The air fills with shouts, cries, and a kind of chaotic energy. It is in this swirl of confusion, in this moment where history has just cracked wide open, that you find your feet moving, not away from the scene, but towards it, drawn by an impulse you don't yet understand. The area around the scaffold is a vortex of human energy. What was once a perimeter held by solemn National Guardsmen is now a porous, chaotic free-for-all. You are carried along by the press of bodies, a leaf in a rushing current. All around you the mood is strange. Not celebratory, not entirely mournful, but something new. A kind of macabre excitement. You see things you can hardly process. A man in a well-tailored coat dips the tip of his pristine white handkerchief into a dark, steaming puddle at the base of the scaffold. A faint look of reverent concentration on his face. A woman, her face streaked with tears, is on her knees trying to scoop some of the blood-soaked sand into a small locket. Another man is breaking off splinters from the wooden steps of the scaffold, as though they were relics of a saint. This isn't just gawking. This is a frantic, desperate scramble for souvenirs, for proof. You realize this is more than just morbid curiosity. In an instant, the last tangible piece of a 1,000-year-old monarchy has been made liquid, and these people are trying to capture it before it evaporates into history. To possess a piece of this moment is to possess what? A curse, a blessing, a token of liberty, or just a really good story to tell your grandchildren, assuming you and they survive the years to come. Your laundress's pragmatism cuts through the historical haze. Your gaze falls not on the drama, but on the details. You see the assistants of the executioner beginning their cleanup, scattering fresh sand, preparing to dismantle the machine. Sanson himself is gone, having discreetly made his exit. And then you see it. Tossed to one side near a pile of discarded ropes is a piece of cloth. A simple linen square, perhaps 20 inches on each side. It's a plain, unassuming rag, probably used by one of the assistants to wipe his hands or a tool. But it is anything but plain. One corner of it is soaked a dark, glistening crimson. Here is a fact most people don't think about. A royal execution, despite the high-minded political theory, is still a messy business. Blood goes places. On the blade, on the basket, on the hands of the men who do the work. The quirky and frankly stomach-turning tidbit is that people reportedly paid for these gruesome mementos. There are accounts of spectators buying everything from locks of the king's hair, surreptitiously snipped, to buttons from his coat. The official republic might be about austere virtue, but on the ground, a black market in royal gore is already booming. Your heart does a strange little jump. It's not about politics. It's about possession. All those noble linens you've scrubbed clean, linens that carried the faint scent of power and privilege. Now here, in this humble rag, is the ultimate, final stain, the one stain you must never wash out. You look around. No one is paying attention to you. They are all focused on the grand spectacle, on scooping at the sand. No one cares about a cleaner's rag. You move deliberately, your steps practiced from navigating the crowded chaos of a marketplace. You stoop, as if to adjust your shoe. Your hand, calloused and chapped from years of lye and cold water, snakes out and snatches the cloth. It's still damp, still warm. The feeling is profoundly unnerving. You quickly fold it, the clean parts inward, and shove it deep into the pocket of your apron. It feels like a burning coal against your thigh. Suddenly you feel conspicuous, a thief. You who have handled the intimate garments of half of Paris and never stolen so much as a lace cuff. The walk away from the scaffold is the longest of your life. Every glance from a stranger feels like an accusation. Every shout of "Vive la République" sounds like a judgment. Your cheap joke from the other day about washing the executioner's clothes has come back to you in a terrible, literal way. You haven't just got a souvenir, you've acquired a secret. And secrets, in this new France, are heavy. Back in the cold sanctuary of your small room, you finally dare to look at your prize. You lay it out on your simple wooden table. The room is quiet. The distant roars of the city barely penetrate the thick stone walls. There it is. A swatch of ordinary linen, transformed by an extraordinary event. The blood has started to dry, turning a deep, rusty brown at the edges. You don't know why you took it. Perhaps it was a flicker of the old reverence for a king, an instinct you didn't even know you had. Or maybe it was the opposite, a trophy of the people's victory over tyranny. Or maybe, most likely, it was just an impulse, a magpie's instinct to grab the shiny, shocking thing. Historians still argue whether the common people who witnessed the execution were radicalized by it or traumatized. Were they cheering the end of oppression, or were they participants in a kind of collective, state-sanctioned murder that would haunt them? As you stare at the cloth, you feel both things are true. You feel a thrill of participation, of being at the very center of history. And you feel a profound unease, a sense of having touched something forbidden and sacred. Now a new problem emerges, one far more complex than any wine stain. What do you do with it? To be found with this relic would be dangerous. It could be seen as a sign of royalist sympathies, a crime that could easily lead you to the same place the king just went. It's not something you can frame and hang on the wall. It's not something you can even talk about. You look around your small room. A bed, a table, a crucifix on the wall, a small chest for your few belongings. Where do you hide a king's blood? Your mind, so used to the practical problems of laundry, sorting whites from colours, using the right soap, conserving hot water, now tackles this new, far stranger challenge. The answer comes to you, inspired by the mundane, hiding something in plain sight. You go to your small vegetable patch in the courtyard. Among the winter bare cabbages and leeks, you find what you're looking for. A gourd. A large bottle-shaped calabash you were drying to use as a water flask. It is hollow, light and unassuming. Using your small kitchen knife, you carefully carve a stopper for its opening. You meticulously fold the linen square, pressing it down into a tight, small bundle. You then push it gently into the hollow of the gourd, followed by two other items as if creating a time capsule. One is a piece of paper, a quick note you scribble, a kind of authentication. On this 21st January, Maximilien Bourdaloue dipped his handkerchief in the blood of the king after his decapitation. You don't sign your own name, of course. You invent one. A man's name. A layer of misdirection. A joke for an audience that doesn't exist yet. The second item is a small portrait. A miniature of a severe-looking man in an official sash. A pamphlet illustration you bought. Not of the king. Just of a man. More misdirection. Obfuscation. A habit one learns quickly in revolutionary times. You seal the gourd. Now it's just a gourd. A piece of dried vegetation containing the most dangerous secret in Paris. It can sit on your shelf and no one will ever know it's not just for water. It's an object of perfect duality, utterly mundane on the outside, cosmically significant on the inside. You place it on the shelf and you go to sleep. The memory of the cold, the crowds and the warm, damp cloth burning behind your eyes. You fall asleep, but the gourd remains. It sits on a dusty shelf through the changing seasons of the revolution, through the bloody days of the terror that follow. While heads roll and factions rise and fall with bewildering speed, your secret sits inert, a quiet witness. You live your life. You return to the bateau lavoir, to the steam and the lie and the endless rhythm of scrubbing. You grow older. The raw, red memory of that January morning softens, becoming just another story, folded into the linen of your past. The gourd becomes part of the room's furniture, as overlooked as a crack in the plaster. Decades pass, you are gone. Your small room has new tenants who marvel at the old, curiously decorated gourd left behind, maybe using it as a simple decoration. France lurches from republic to empire, back to monarchy, then to republic again. The gourd, your calabash, begins its own quiet, anonymous journey. Perhaps it's sold in a junk shop after your death. Perhaps it's given away. It passes from hand to hand, its value based solely on its intricate folk art carvings. Carvings you added over the years, idle whittling to make it look like just another peasant trinket. A family in Italy, perhaps a branch of the Bonaparte family, acquires it, taking it far from the blood-soaked soil of Paris. For them, it is merely an eccentric antique, a conversation piece. The king's blood, sealed within, slumbers through the 19th century. It is now the early 20th century. The world is at war. Amidst the chaos and upheaval, the gourd surfaces again, this time in the possession of an Italian family who believe it to be a historic artifact. They are convinced of its story. It's no longer just a gourd, it is the gourd. The legend has been passed down with it, mutating slightly, as legends do. The name you scribbled on the paper, Maximilien Bourdaloue, has become central to its story. People look for this man in the historical record and, of course, find no trace. He was your invention, a phantom born of caution. The gourd is eventually purchased by a wealthy Spanish collector, a man with a passion for historical curiosities. He is captivated by its story, its sheer implausibility. The object, once your dangerous secret, is now a prized possession, its monetary value growing with every retelling of its tale. It has fully transitioned from history to mythology. And like many myths, it invites skepticism. Historians dismiss it, a folktale, a macabre fabrication. It's a classic, quirky, historical tidbit, the sort of thing that's too perfectly weird to be true. Remember those bizarre remedies from other eras, like crocodile dung sunscreen in ancient Egypt? The gourd feels like it belongs in that category, a story you tell with a smirk. The century turns again. It is now the modern day. And modern science has tools you could never have dreamed of. Tools that can interrogate the past, that can question objects and even find truth in stains. The gourd, still in the possession of the collector's family, becomes the subject of intense scientific interest. Here, the tale takes a genuinely strange turn. A team of scientists is given permission to examine the artifact. Using a tiny camera on a flexible probe, they look inside the gourd without breaking it. They see the dried, folded cloth. They see the crumpled paper with your fake name. They see the miniature portrait. The legend, it seems, has a solid core. But the real test is DNA. They manage to extract a minuscule, degraded sample from the brownish stain on the linen. The challenge, of course, is finding something to compare it to. How do you find a verified sample of Louis XVI's DNA? The answer lies with another, even more tragic artifact. The preserved heart of his son, Louis Charles, who died in prison years after his father. The so-called Lost Dauphin, Louis XVII. The heart had been smuggled from the prison by a sympathetic doctor and passed through generations of royalists. A mainstream, verified historical fact is that this heart exists, and in the year 2000 was confirmed through DNA testing to belong to a descendant of Marie Antoinette's maternal line, the Habsburgs. Now, science had a benchmark, a genetic profile of the royal family. The stage is set for a remarkable historical confrontation. The DNA from your simple laundress's rag versus the DNA from a boy king's mummified heart. The results, when they are published, are electrifying. The sample from the gourd shows a direct paternal link to the Habsburg line confirmed in the heart of Louis XVII. The man whose blood stained your cloth shared a father with the boy who died in the temple. It was him, Louis XVI. Your grimy souvenir was real. Your secret, kept safe inside a humble vegetable shell for over 200 years, was true. And yet, this is where the story lingers in a gentle ambiguity, perfect for a late-night thought. The final chapter remains a matter of some debate among the scientific and historical communities. The DNA is tantalizing, but degraded. The chain of custody for the gourd is purely anecdotal for over a century. Historians still argue whether the scientific evidence is conclusive enough to outweigh the sheer fairy tale-like strangeness of the object's journey. Is it proof? Or is it just an incredible, multi-generational coincidence? A final clever joke you played on the future? And so, as you drift towards sleep, picture it. A museum case, climate-controlled, bathed in soft light. Inside sits a dried, brown gourd covered in carvings, an object of no intrinsic value. Next to it, a small linen square, discoloured with a famous fateful stain. It is your legacy. The legacy of a woman whose name is lost to time, who felt the damp cold of the Seine in her bones, and who, on one chaotic winter morning, made a decision. an impulse to snatch a piece of history and hide it in the most ordinary thing she could find. You didn't do it for fame or politics or money. You simply saw it, and you took it. A laundress standing at the messy, untidy crossroads of history, who decided one stain was worth keeping. And in doing so, you preserved a secret that outlived empires, a whisper from the past, waiting patiently in the dark for science to finally come and listen. The doctor's grim choice. You are a doctor, but tonight you feel more like an accountant for the dead. The oil lamp on your desk casts a flickering amber glow across the pages of a thick ledger. The room is quiet, filled only with the soft scratch of your pen nib on the paper and the distant mournful cry of a city settling into a deep winter cold. Outside, this is Vienna, 1846, the grand capital of the Austrian Empire, a city of waltzes, coffee houses, and immense intellectual pride. And here, in the heart of that pride, is the Vienna General Hospital, the Allgemeines Krankenhaus, one of the largest and most advanced medical institutions in the entire world. It is a place you fought to get into, a place where the future of medicine is supposedly being written. Your gaze drifts from the ledger to the window, where frost is tracing intricate patterns on the glass. From this window, you can just see the silhouette of the hospital's two maternity clinics. Two buildings side by side, identical in almost every way. Almost. This hospital is your life. You are young, Hungarian, and deeply ambitious. Your official title is assistant to Professor Johann Klein in the first maternity clinic. It's a prestigious post. Here, the best and brightest medical students in Europe come to train. They learn the newest techniques. They attend lectures from the great minds of the age, and they deliver babies under the supervision of esteemed doctors like yourself. The first clinic is the vanguard of modern scientific obstetrics. The second clinic, just next door, is run entirely by midwives. It is seen as simpler, a place for traditional learning, for women teaching women a craft as old as time itself. Less scientific, less prestigious. It is, by all accounts, the inferior of the two. And that is the crux of the problem. That is the mystery that is keeping you awake tonight, filling these pages with grim arithmetic, because in your state-of-the-art, scientifically superior first clinic, the women are dying. They arrive healthy, they give birth, and then, days later, a fever takes them, a raging fire that burns through their bodies, bringing with it chills, pain, and a delirium from which few return. They call it puerperal fever, childbed fever. You, in your more private moments, have come to call it the shadow. It falls almost exclusively on your ward. In the inferior second clinic run by the humble midwives, new mothers and their babies are leaving in droves, healthy and happy. Here in the doctor's clinic they are leaving in coffins. The numbers you are staring at in your ledger don't just suggest a difference, they scream it. In some months, 1 in 10 women who enter your ward will not leave alive. Some months, it is closer to 1 in 6. In the midwives' clinic, the rate is often less than 1 in 50. It makes no sense. It's like having two identical bakeries, one of which inexplicably bakes poison into every 10th loaf of bread. You walk these wards every day. You know the scent of them in your bones. A sterile, astringent smell mixed with the scent of linen, and, underneath it all, the faint, metallic tang of fear. You see the hopeful faces of the women arriving, their bellies round with promise, and you have grown to dread the sight. You've seen the swift and terrifying progression of the illness more times than you can bear to count. You have held a young woman's hand as she thrashes in fever, calling for a mother who is miles away in some quiet village, a village she will never see again. Your colleagues, the other esteemed doctors and professors, have theories, of course. They speak of miasmas, bad airs that drift in from the nearby Danube or the city morgue. It's the prevailing wisdom of the age. The idea that disease is carried on foul odours, a sort of malevolent atmospheric condition. They blame it on the weather, on cosmic terrestrial influences, on the emotional delicacy of the female patients. This has been the standard explanation for centuries, the 19th century equivalent of blaming a mysterious illness on your Wi-Fi signal. You have listened to these theories in meetings, nodding politely while a knot of frustration tightens in your gut, because the miasma would have to be a very discerning, very specific miasma. A miasma that, for some reason, despises doctors but is perfectly fine with midwives. A miasma that can apparently read the signs above the clinic doors. It's nonsense and you know it. Some have even suggested that the presence of male doctors itself is the cause, that the mere shame of being examined by a man is enough to trigger the fatal fever. This is a quirky, fringe idea that has a certain poetic symmetry, but it also strikes you as absurd. You've tried changing everything you can think of. You changed the birthing positions. You changed the laundry routines. At one point, you had the priest walk a different, quieter route to deliver last rites, thinking the sound of his bell was inducing a fatal terror in the patients. Nothing worked. The shadow remained. This obsession is beginning to change you. You have become difficult, brusque, impatient with the endless circular discussions of your superiors. Historians still argue whether your difficult, obsessive personality was a product of the horrors you witnessed, or if that abrasiveness was always there, merely given a target by the tragedy. To you, it doesn't feel like a choice. How can you be expected to make pleasant small talk over coffee when you feel like you are presiding over a slaughterhouse? Your mind is a maelstrom of data. The numbers, the dates, the names. You have compiled charts. You have made graphs. You know which bed is luckier than others. You know the exact mortality rate for every single month for the past 6 years. You're haunted not by ghosts but by statistics. You look back at your ledger. Last month, 18 deaths in your clinic. 2 in the midwives. You close the book with a heavy sigh, the sound unnaturally loud in the still room. You have stared at the problem from every conceivable angle. It is a locked room mystery, and you are standing inside the locked room, watching the victims fall around you, helpless to stop it. And the worst part, the part that gnaws at you in the darkest hours of the night, is the terrifying thought that the killer might be you. The frustration becomes a low-grade fever of its own, a constant hum of discontent that colours your every waking moment. You find yourself wandering the hospital corridors at odd hours, a ghost in a white coat searching for an answer that remains maddeningly out of reach. Your colleagues are starting to look at you differently. They see your charts and your obsessive note-taking not as the work of a diligent scientist, but as the fixation of a madman. A man with a bee in his bonnet, as one of them muttered, just loud enough for you to hear. They offer their condolences for your stress, then go back to discussing the fine points of a new surgical technique or the merits of a particular vintage of Takagi wine. You continue to clutch at straws. Perhaps it's a draft from a particular window. You have it sealed. The deaths continue. Perhaps it's the food. You meticulously compare the menus between the two clinics. They are identical. You even in a moment of pure desperation consider the laundry soap, a faint echo of our laundress from another time, another revolution, who understood the secrets hidden in linen. But it's the same lye soap for both wards. The shadow doesn't care about soap. The pressure is immense. The public knows. Women in Vienna are so terrified of your clinic that they will do anything to avoid it. They give birth in the street, pretending it happened suddenly on the way to the hospital, just so they can be admitted on grounds of a street birth. These women, paradoxically, are almost always fine. They become another maddening statistic in your ledger. Giving birth in a filthy alley is somehow safer than being treated by the most celebrated doctors in Europe. It's a joke so dark, so absurd, you can't even bring yourself to laugh. Your search for answers leads you to a place you instinctively dread, but feel compelled to go. The autopsy room. The pathological anatomy theatre is a world away from the bright hope of the maternity ward. It is a cold stone room in the hospital's basement, smelling perpetually of death and the carbolic acid used to try and mask it. It is here that you and your students come to learn from the dead. It is a cornerstone of the modern Vienna medical school. To understand disease, one must dissect it. And so, nearly every morning, you and a clutch of medical students leave the maternity ward, walk down the long corridors, and descend into this cold theatre. You perform autopsies on the women who died under your care the day before, seeking clues in their ravaged organs. You feel the grit of pathology under your fingernails, see the damage the fever wreaks firsthand. Then, duty done, you and the students simply return to the maternity clinic to begin your daily rounds, examining the living patients, the pregnant women, the new mothers. You go directly from the dead to the living. It is the routine. It is what doctors do. It does not occur to you or to anyone else that this might be significant. Then comes the spring of 1847. You are away for a few weeks on a necessary trip to Venice. When you return, you are met with tragic news. Your friend and colleague, Jakob Kolečka, a professor of forensic medicine, is dead. He died while you were gone, and the manner of his death sends a jolt of ice through your veins. Kolečka had been performing an autopsy when a student, distracted for a moment, accidentally pricked his finger with the scalpel they were using. It was a small wound, insignificant, but within days Kolečka fell ill. Your colleagues recount the symptoms to you, their faces grim, the chills, the raging fever, the pain. You listen, and a horrifying sense of déjà vu washes over you. You go to the records office and pull the report from Kolečka's own autopsy. As you read the description of the pathological findings, the inflammation, the pus, the state of his internal organs, you realize with a breath-stopping certainty that you are reading a perfect description of a man who has died of childbed fever. But Kolečka was not a new mother. Kolečka was a man. Suddenly, all the abstract theories about miasmas and cosmic rays and emotional fragility evaporate, like mist in a harsh sun. The locked room is thrown wide open. There is no discerning phantom drifting through the wards. Kolečka was not killed by bad air or a priest's bell. He was killed by the scalpel. He was killed by what was on the scalpel, what came from the cadaver. Cadaverous particles. That is the phrase that forms in your mind. Tiny, invisible particles of decaying matter, introduced into his blood through the student's accidental cut. And then, the final dreadful connection snaps into place. It's so simple, so obvious, once you feel a wave of nausea at your own blindness. What is the one major difference? The one variable you have overlooked in all your months of frantic searching? The doctors and medical students in the first clinic, your clinic, spend their mornings in the autopsy room, handling the dead. And then they go directly to the maternity ward to examine pregnant women, their hands unwashed. The midwives in the second clinic never perform autopsies. They never touch the dead. The shadow in your ward is not a miasma. It is not a curse. It is you. It is your colleagues. It is your students. You are the carriers. You are bringing death with you from the morgue, carrying it on your hands from one patient to the next. Historians still argue whether your flash of insight was a pure stroke of logical genius or a desperate guess born of grief for your friend. In that moment, it feels like neither. It feels like a truth so hideous and so profound that it's a wonder the entire hospital wasn't built on a foundation of it. You now possess a truth that could save countless lives, but it is also an accusation, a horrifying indictment of the very practice of modern medicine you have all championed. You are not just healers, you are contamination. You are poison. This insight is not just a scientific breakthrough, it's a profound professional insult. The only quirky tidbit is that for a brief moment you entertain the notion of a conspiracy of lazy miasmas who refuse to travel between floors. But the grim humor fades almost instantly. You have found your killer. Now you must convince everyone else that the killer is them. The weight of your discovery is immense. It's a physical presence pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. You don't sleep. You pace your small room, the image of Kolechka's autopsy report superimposed over the faces of the young women you've watched die. The connection is a searing brand in your mind. Cadaverous particles. You say the words over and over to yourself, a grim mantra. This isn't a vague, mystical force, it is tangible, it is transferable, and if it can be transferred, it can be stopped. The solution that springs to your mind is born of this new, terrifying clarity. It is profoundly simple, so simple in fact that it seems almost insultingly basic compared to the complexity of the problem as you once saw it. You don't need new ventilation systems. You don't need to recalibrate cosmic energies. You need soap. And something more. You devise a new protocol, a rule absolute and non-negotiable. Anyone entering the first maternity clinic, doctor, student or assistant, who has come from the autopsy theatre, must first wash their hands thoroughly. Not just with water. They must wash them in a solution of chlorinated lime. It's a harsh bleaching agent, the kind of substance used for disinfection, for eradicating foul odours. The smell is sharp and unpleasant, and it lingers on the skin. But you reason that if it can neutralize the powerful smell of decay, perhaps it can neutralize the deadly, invisible particles as well. You have basins of this chlorine solution placed at the entrance to the ward. It is a line of defense, a chemical baptism. You present your idea to your superior, Professor Klein. You lay out your reasoning, your voice tight with the urgency of it all. You explain the connection to Kolechka's death, the damning logic of it. You expect, what? Relief, praise, a shared sense of breakthrough. Instead, you are met with a cool, dismissive skepticism. Klein looks at you as if you've suggested sacrificing a goat to appease the gods of health. Your theory is an insult. It implies that he, a respected professor and the head of the clinic, is personally responsible for the deaths of his patients. That doctors, gentlemen of science and learning, are no better than butchers, soiling their hands and spreading filth. It runs contrary to all established medical doctrine. The mainstream historical fact is that germ theory does not exist yet. The idea that invisible living organisms cause disease is still decades away, a fringe concept scoffed at by the medical establishment. You are proposing a solution to a problem that, in their view, isn't real. There are no cadaverous particles. There are only miasmas and imbalances. But you are the clinic's assistant. Klein, perhaps to humour you, perhaps to prove you wrong once and for all, reluctantly agrees to a trial. Your hand-washing edict is implemented. It is met with grumbling and outright mockery from the medical students and some of your fellow doctors. They complain about the tediousness of the task, the chapping of their skin, the foul, lingering smell of chlorine. They perform the washing perfunctorily, with an air of theatrical resentment. It's the 19th century equivalent of an office mandating a new, annoying piece of paperwork. Everyone does it, but no one likes it. You become the sentinel of the wash basin. You stand there, arms crossed, your expression grim, making sure every man who passes dips his hands and scrubs. You are no longer just a doctor, you're a hygienist, a scold. You can feel the resentment directed at you, a palpable force in the air, but you don't care. You are watching the ledgers. The effect is immediate, it is miraculous, it is undeniable. The mortality rate in your clinic plummets. In the month before you started, it was over 18%. The month after, it drops to just over 2%. The month after that, it falls to a little over 1%, almost identical to the midwives' clinic next door. For 2 months after that, there are 0 deaths. 0. The shadow has lifted. The wards are no longer places of terror, but of quiet, routine joy. The women are living. They are going home with their babies. You have done it. The numbers prove it. The absence of coffins proves it. And this, right here, is the great, heartbreaking irony of your life. You saved them. The proof is irrefutable. Your data is perfect, and your colleagues hate you for it. Your success is not seen as a shared victory, but as a personal rebuke. Every life you save is another stone in the wall of their resentment. You haven't just proved your theory right, you have, by extension, proved them wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. They do not see the chlorine solution as a triumph of reason, but as the gimmick of an eccentric Hungarian with a grudge. They start to push back. They forget to wash their hands, and you are forced to publicly chastise them. They whisper behind your back, questioning your methods, your sanity. Professor Klein remains deeply skeptical, attributing the sudden drop in deaths to a new ventilation system that was installed around the same time, or just a pure chance. He cannot, will not, accept the humiliating truth your basins of chlorinated water represent. The tension becomes unbearable. Historians still argue whether a more diplomatic man could have won over the Viennese establishment, or if the medical dogma of the time was so entrenched that any challenge to it was doomed to fail. Could you have succeeded by being charming and persuasive rather than blunt and confrontational? Perhaps, but it is not in your nature. You have the truth, the data is clear. Why should you have to coddle their fragile egos when women's lives are at stake? This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of fact. A quirky and sad footnote to your efforts is that you try publishing your results, but you are not a natural writer. Your papers are dry, filled with tables of statistics, lacking the eloquent, philosophical prose your peers admire. You present facts without flair, and for this, You are ignored. You have the cure, but you have no bedside manner for convincing your own profession. The prophet, it turns out, needs good marketing. The silence in your ward becomes your only true ally. The silence where once there were feverish cries. The silence of healthy babies sleeping. The silence of mothers who will live to hear their children's first words. This silence is your data, your irrefutable proof. But in the halls of the Vienna General Hospital, it is a silence that roars with accusation. Your relationship with Professor Klein, and by extension the entire Viennese medical establishment, deteriorates completely. It is a slow, cold decay. There are no more arguments, just a frigid, disapproving quiet. Your presence is an embarrassment, a constant chlorine-scented reminder of their collective failure. Your success has made you professionally toxic. Your performance review, if 19th century medicine had such a modern and dreadful invention, would be a paradox. Strengths: virtually eliminated patient mortality. Weaknesses: makes everyone else look like a negligent fool. Eventually, the inevitable happens. Your contract at the hospital is not renewed. It is a quiet, bureaucratic severing. There is no grand confrontation, no dramatic showdown. You are simply let go. An inconvenience that has been neatly filed away. As you pack your few belongings, you know, with the certainty that chills you to the bone, what will happen next. The basins of chlorinated lime will disappear from the doorway. Your bothersome, insulting little ritual will be abandoned, and the shadow will return to the first clinic. And you are right. After your departure, the hand-washing stops, and the death rate immediately skyrockets, returning to its old horrifying levels. The hospital prefers its familiar, prestigious tragedy to your uncomfortable plebeian cure. You leave Vienna, the city of your greatest triumph and most bitter defeat. You return to your native Hungary, to Pest, taking a position as the head of obstetrics at a small hospital. It is a less prestigious post, a definite step down on the career ladder. But you are no longer chasing prestige. You are chasing the shadow. In your new ward, you are in charge. There is no Professor Klein to question you. There is no cohort of arrogant medical students to mock you. You immediately institute your policy of chlorinated lime hand washing. And just as in Vienna, the results are swift and absolute. You virtually eliminate childbed fever from your department. Over a period of 6 years, only a handful of women die from the illness under your direct care. It is a quiet, stunning success, a vindication that happens far from the eyes of those who scorned you. But the victory feels hollow. It is not enough to save the women in your own little corner of the world. The ignorance that rejected you in Vienna still flourishes across Europe. Esteemed professors are still lecturing about miasmas and cosmic rays. Doctors are still walking from autopsy to delivery, their hands unwashed, carrying your cadaverous particles with them. So you take up a new weapon, one you are far less skilled with than the scalpel or the ledger, the pen. You begin writing, frantic, passionate, increasingly furious open letters to the great professors of Europe. You publish your data, you detail your success, and you beg them, you implore them to see the simple, horrible truth. When they ignore you, your tone shifts from pleading to outrage. You denounce them as negligent. You call them what you believe them to be, murderers. You are no longer trying to persuade. You are screaming into a void, hoping the echo will shake the world. It's the 19th century equivalent of writing a furious blog post that you're pretty sure no one will read, except maybe the people you're insulting. Your behavior becomes more and more erratic. friends grow concerned. Your public outbursts are costing you what little professional standing you have left. The years of thankless battle have taken their toll, eroding your patience, your diplomacy, your very sense of proportion. You are a man possessed by a single righteous truth, and you cannot understand why the rest of the world chooses to be blind. This is the point in your story where the threads become tangled, where history gives way to a sad and contested mystery. In the summer of 1865, your mental health appears to collapse. Historians and indeed medical professionals still argue whether you were suffering from a genuine psychiatric illness, perhaps Alzheimer's or even late-stage syphilis, or if you were simply a man finally broken by 2 decades of relentless, soul-crushing opposition. Or, as a darker theory suggests, perhaps your colleagues, tired of your public rants, conspired to have you committed. Whatever the cause, you are lured to a mental asylum under a false pretext, believing you are simply visiting it as a consultant. Once inside, you realize you have been tricked. You resist. There is a struggle with the guards. In the struggle, you sustain an injury, a cut on your hand. The wound becomes infected. It develops gangrene, and so you die. At the age of 47, in a Viennese insane asylum, you die of sepsis, a raging systemic infection, identical in every way to the childbed fever you dedicated your life to fighting. The same enemy you unmasked claims you in the end. A final, exquisitely cruel irony, delivered by fate. You are buried in Vienna, and for a time your work is almost entirely forgotten. The man with the bee in his bonnet is gone, and the medical world breathes a quiet sigh of relief. But a truth as powerful as yours cannot be buried forever. Remember those cadaverous particles, your great insight, your theory of a physical contagion carried from one person to another didn't die with you. Decades later, a French chemist named Louis Pasteur would prove that invisible microorganisms, germs, are the cause of many diseases. An English surgeon named Joseph Lister, reading Pasteur's work, would pioneer antiseptic surgery using carbolic acid to sterilize instruments and wounds, echoing your use of chlorine. The germ theory of disease would become the foundation of modern medicine. Slowly, your name would be resurrected. Doctors would read your old, angry letters and your dry tables of data and realize, with a dawning sense of shame, that the strange, difficult Hungarian had been right all along, decades ahead of his time. As you drift off to sleep, imagine your ghost finally finding peace. The basins of chlorine are gone, but in every hospital in the world, in every operating theatre, every clinic, and every ward, doctors and nurses are washing their hands. Your crusade, which cost you your career and your life, has become a simple, universal, and unquestioned act. An act that has saved not thousands, but hundreds of millions of lives. You lost every battle, but in the end, you won the war. You just weren't alive to see the victory parade, the hostage who became a spy. Your first world is a world of green and water. You are born under a sky that is almost always a deep, brilliant blue, or a heavy, promising grey. The air you breathe is thick and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth, of blooming orchids, and of the copal incense your father burns in the mornings. You are a child of privilege, born into the house of a noble lord, a cacique, in the land of Coatzacoalcos, on the shimmering Gulf coast of what will one day be called Mexico. Your childhood is not one of harshness, but of learning. You learn the intricate rhythms of the 2 sacred calendars, the 2 260-day ritual cycle in the 365-day solar year. As a child of the nobility, your own name is tied to this calendar, a quirky, specific detail of your culture. Depending on the day you were born, you might be named for an animal, a concept, or a number, like 1 rabbit or 7 flower. It's a system that binds you to the cosmos from your very first breath, a celestial birth certificate. You learn the elegant sweep of the Nahua language, the courtly speech of the powerful Mexica Empire to the west, an empire whose influence touches everything like a distant but powerful sun. You are a gifted child. While other children play, you listen. You listen to the servants who speak a local dialect, to the merchants who arrive by canoe from the south, their speech studded with strange words from the Mayan lands. Language for you is not just a tool, it is a landscape. You wander through its valleys and peaks, collecting new sounds and phrases the way others might collect smooth river stones or bright feathers. Your mind quietly maps the connections between them, finding the hidden pathways from one tongue to another. This is your talent, a quiet, almost secret superpower in a world that has no need for a young girl to have one. Your job is to be a daughter, to learn to weave, and eventually to be a bride in a marriage that will secure an alliance. That's the career path for someone in your position. No resumes required. The world outside your father's lands is a complex tapestry of power and obligation. The great Mexica in their island city of Tenochtitlan demand tribute from everyone. Cacao beans, cotton textiles, jade, obsidian, and sometimes the lives of young men and women for their hungry gods. Your father navigates this world with a careful tread, balancing the demands of the empire with the needs of his own people. The regional politics are a delicate dance, a web of rivalries and alliances that makes a modern family reunion look like a lesson in blissful harmony. Then your world ends. It doesn't end with a bang or a great war, but with a quiet absence. Your father dies. Your place in the world, once so secure, becomes soft and unstable beneath your feet. Your mother, to protect her own standing, marries another lord, and this new lord has a son. Suddenly you, the firstborn daughter of the previous ruler, are no longer an asset. You are a problem, a complication in the line of inheritance, a loose thread in the new tapestry he wishes to weave. Historians still argue whether your mother's next decision was born of malice or a grim, pragmatic sort of love. Did she despise you as a remnant of her past, or was she trying to save you? Did she see a greater danger for you in staying, a quiet accident, a convenient illness, and decide that selling you was a form of salvation? We will never know. It is a mystery lost to the jungle, a private heartache that history can only guess at. All you know is the confusion, the slow chilling of your life, the way conversations stop when you enter a room, and then a journey, a quiet trip down the river. You are handed over to a group of coastal traders. It's not a violent abduction, it's a transaction, as smooth and unemotional as trading a bundle of cotton for a bag of salt. One moment you are the daughter of a lord, the next you are cargo, a piece of property. It's the sort of abrupt career change that can really throw a wrench in your week. The traders take you southeast, to the lands of the Maya in Tabasco. The air here is just as thick, the sky just as blue, but everything else is different. The food, the shape of the rooftops, the patterns on the pottery. And most importantly, the language. Here they speak Chontal Maya, a language as different from your native Nahuatl as stone is from water. You are now a slave, a pentacob. Your duties are menial, your status is nothing. Your past life might as well have been a dream. You are stripped of your name, your family, your future. But you still have one thing, your gift. While your hands are grinding maize or weaving reeds, your mind is working. You listen, you learn. The harsh, clipped sounds of the Mayan tongue slowly arrange themselves in your head. You start to understand. You start to speak. You absorb this new language not just as a tool for survival, but because it is what you do. You file it away, placing it beside your native Nahuatl. You now have two languages locked away inside you, two worlds of meaning. You are a living bridge, though no one, least of all you, knows it yet. You stand on the coast of this new land, watching the endless expanse of turquoise water, feeling profoundly and completely alone. You are a girl with no name, a princess in rags, a translator with no one to translate for. You are a key, waiting for a lock you cannot possibly imagine is coming. And out there, beyond the horizon, the great sailing ships are already on their way. Years pass, marked not by calendars, but by the rhythm of the rainy and dry seasons. The sting of your betrayal dulls into a persistent low ache. You have grown. You are no longer the frightened child sold down the river. You are a young woman who has learned the harsh calculus of survival. You have learned to be observant, to be quiet, to make yourself useful, but not conspicuous. You are now just one of several slave women in the household of the Tabascan lord. Your past a secret you guard closely. Your mastery of the Chontal Mayan language is now effortless, your second skin. Then one day the routine is shattered by a tremor of fear and excitement that ripples through the town. Strange ships have been sighted, massive wooden vessels with sails like colossal white clouds, far larger than any trading canoe. They are not the first. You've heard stories of these men before, of their pale skin, their hair the color of corn silk or the setting sun, their faces covered in thick beards. But now, they are here, at your shores. Their leader steps onto the beach. He is a man of average height, but he carries himself with an unnerving, focused intensity. His armor gleams in the tropical sun, so bright it hurts your eyes. His name is Hernan Cortez. This is a mainstream historical fact that rings like a thunderclap. His landing in 1519 marked the beginning of a collision between two worlds that had developed in near total isolation for 15,000 years. The local Tabascan warriors, brave but hopelessly outmatched, confront these newcomers. There is a battle. You hear the terrifying roar of the Spanish cannons, a sound like an angry god clearing his throat. You see the creatures they ride, enormous, powerful beasts the likes of which no one has ever seen. Horses. The Tabascans fight with obsidian-edged clubs and cotton armor. The Spanish fight with steel, gunpowder, and cavalry. The outcome is swift and brutal. Defeated, the Lord of Tabasco must offer a tribute to appease these strange, violent men. He offers them gold, food, and cotton blankets. And as a gesture of peace, he offers them 20 women from his household to cook for them and serve them. You are one of them. Once again, you are a transaction, a piece of a peace treaty, given from one master to another, a gift of flesh to placate a conqueror. You and the 19 other women are brought before the Spanish captains. The air is thick with the alien smells of unwashed wool, metal, and sweat. The men are loud, their language a torrent of rough, percussive sounds utterly foreign to you. They look at you and the other women with a mixture of curiosity, contempt, and appraisal, the way a man might inspect livestock. You are handed over to one of the captains, a man named Alonso Hernandez Puertocarrero. Your future, it seems, will be to grind corn and warm the bed of this bearded stranger. Then, something remarkable happens. A moment of pure chance that changes everything. Cortés needs to communicate with the Tabascans, but he has a problem. His official translator is a Spanish friar named Jerónimo de Aguilar, a man who was shipwrecked on the coast of Yucatan years ago and had lived among the Maya. Aguilar speaks Mayan fluently, but here, in Tabasco, the local lords want to communicate through Nahuatl-speaking emissaries sent from the Mexica court, who are in the area. Aguilar knows Mayan, but not Nahuatl. The chain of communication is broken. It's a classic case of technological incompatibility, the 16th century equivalent of having the right charging cable but the wrong power outlet. Cortés grows impatient. He asks through Aguilar if anyone among the Tabascans speaks the language of the Mexica. The question is translated from Spanish to Mayan. The Tabascan lords shake their heads. No one. Then someone, perhaps one of the other slave women who knew a fragment of your story, gestures towards you. You are pushed forward. The bearded strangers all stare at you. This is the moment. The key finds its lock. Timidly you speak, not in Mayan, the language of your captivity, but in the elegant, courtly Nahuatl of your noble childhood. The Mexica emissary's eyes widen in shock. Then you turn and, in flawless Chontal Maya, you explain to Aguilar what they said. He, in turn, translates your Mayan into Spanish for Cortés. A clumsy three-part chain of communication has been forged. Spanish to Mayan, Mayan to Nahuatl, and back again. Cortés stares at you, a flicker of profound understanding in his eyes. He is not looking at a slave woman anymore. He is looking at a tool, a weapon. He is looking at the most valuable piece of treasure he has yet found in this new world. A quirky historical footnote to this encounter is that you weren't given the name you are known by today. Not at first. The Spanish, as a matter of course, baptized all 20 of you. You were given the Christian name Marina. Your historical name, Malintzin or Malinche, came later, given to you by the Nahua peoples themselves. The Itzin suffix was an honorific, a sign of respect. You went from being an anonymous slave to being respectfully titled, all because you could talk. Suddenly you are taken from Captain Puertocarrero and brought to stand beside Cortés himself. Your duties are no longer domestic. Your value is no longer in your hands, but in your mind. Historians still argue whether your quick rise was purely a matter of linguistic convenience, or if Cortés immediately saw in you a political and strategic intelligence that went far beyond mere translation. Did he see just a mouthpiece, or did he recognize, in that first moment, a fellow mind, a skilled navigator of human politics? As you stand between the grim-faced conquistadors and the imperious Mexica lords, translating the first formal greetings between them, you feel a shift in the world and in yourself. The fear is still there, a cold stone in your stomach, but beneath it something else is kindling, a flicker of power. You are no longer a passive object being traded. You are an active participant. You are the sole bridge across an impossible gulf of culture and language. And you begin to realize that the person who controls the bridge can, in subtle ways, direct the traffic. That clumsy three-person translation chain becomes the rhythm of your new life. Cortés speaks in Spanish, a language that sounds to you like rushing water over stones. Aguilar, the shipwrecked friar, catches the words and turns them into the familiar Mayan of your recent past. And then you, the final link, receive the Mayan and render it into the elegant, formal Nahuatl that is your birthright. It is an awkward process, a conference call with a bad connection and too many people on the line, but it works. And at the center of it, holding the whole fragile enterprise together, is you. Quickly, however, you begin to do more than just translate words. You translate worlds. When a local lord offers Cortez a gift of food and says, "My house is poor, but please accept this humble offering," you don't just convey the words. You explain to Cortez through Aguilar that this is a required courtly formula. You tell him that the man is powerful, not poor, and that the gift is a gesture of respect, but also a measurement of Spanish intent. You start to translate the subtext, the pauses, the flicker in a nobleman's eyes. You are not just a dictionary. You are becoming a cultural interpreter. And all the while, your mind is doing what it does best. It is absorbing. The rough sounds of Spanish, which were at first just noise, begin to resolve themselves into patterns, into meaning. You learn the words for gold, water, horse, God. You learn them with a speed that is nothing short of miraculous. Your linguistic gift, dormant for so long, has found the challenge of its lifetime. Soon the chain of communication shortens. You begin to understand Cortez directly, and you begin to speak to him in a halting but functional Spanish. Aguilar, the friar, becomes increasingly redundant. The bad connection is fixed. Now there is a direct line. You are the sole operating system for this entire expedition. This elevates your status immensely. You are no longer just a useful native. You are Cortez's shadow, his voice, his ears. You are present at every meeting, every negotiation. You stand beside him as he receives delegations from far-off kingdoms, including emissaries from the great emperor himself, Moctezuma. These Mexica lords arrive, draped in fine cotton and the iridescent green feathers of the quetzal bird. They speak a high-flown, poetic Nahuatl, filled with allusions and metaphors. You alone can pass their flowery warnings and veiled threats, rendering them into blunt Spanish for your captain. And this is where you evolve from mouthpiece to mastermind. As the Spanish march inland from the coast, they enter the lands of the Totonacs. The Totonac capital, Cempoala, is a beautiful city, its buildings plastered and gleaming white in the sun. Here you encounter a people who are prosperous but deeply unhappy. They are subjects of the Mexica Empire, and they suffer under the weight of its heavy tribute demands. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. Cortez's conquest would have been impossible without the alliances he forged with the enemies of the Mexica. But he never would have known who those enemies were without you. You listen to the Totonac lords complain. You hear the resentment in their voices, the hatred they hold for their distant masters in Tenochtitlan. And you don't just translate their complaints to Cortez. You explain the opportunity. You tell him, these people are not friends of the Mexica. They pay tribute in goods, but also in the lives of their children for sacrifice. Their loyalty is a cage, not a choice. If you offer to break the cage, they will flock to your banner. This is no longer translation. This is strategic counsel. Advising on which local superpowers to antagonize is not usually in the job description for an intern, but your career is on a rather unique trajectory. You become the architect of this first great alliance. You are there at the tense negotiations, your presence calming the Totonac lords, who see you as one of their own people who has somehow gained influence over these terrifying newcomers. You craft the words that forge the pacts, balancing Totonac desires for liberation with Cortez's demands for loyalty and support. It is a masterful piece of diplomacy, conducted by a woman who, just months before, was a nameless slave. With every league the Spanish travel inland, your value compounds. You gather intelligence not just from formal meetings, but from the gossip of the marketplace, from the songs of the women grinding maize. You compile a mental map of the political landscape, which kingdoms hate each other, which families hold ancient grudges, which rulers are seen as weak. The Spanish see a monolithic empire. You see a fractured, squabbling continent, ripe for being played against itself. And here, in the midst of this journey, is the question that will follow your name for the next 500 years. Historians still argue whether you were a willing collaborator, driven by a thirst for revenge against the people who had enslaved you, a pragmatic survivor making the best possible moves to stay alive in a terrifying new world, or simply a victim of circumstance with no real agency at all. Are you a traitor to your people? Or did your people betray you first when your mother sold you down the river? Do you even owe loyalty to a Mexican empire that your own father's kingdom chafed under? These questions swirl around your story like smoke from a temple brazier. All you know is your own reality. You are no longer powerless. The fear is still there, a constant companion, but it is now joined by a sense of purpose. You have a place, a vital, irreplaceable place. You eat better, you dress in finer clothes given to you by Cortez, and you command the respect and the fear of both Spanish soldiers and indigenous lords. You look at the bearded men with their steel and their horses. You look at the noble lords with their jade plugs and intricate politics, and you realize, with a dizzying clarity, that you may be the only person on earth who truly understands them both. Your journey culminates in the Valley of Mexico, at the entrance to the greatest city you have ever seen, Tenochtitlan. It is a breathtaking sight, a metropolis built on an island in the middle of a vast lake, connected to the shore by long, elegant causeways. Its temples, the teocalli, rise towards the sky like man-made mountains. The city glitters. You are no stranger to civilization, but this is a vision of power on an entirely different scale. And at its heart is the man who haunts the dreams of every king and commoner on the continent, the great speaker, Moctezuma II. You stand on the causeway, the November air cool and thin, so different from the soupy atmosphere of your coastal home. On one side of you is Hernan Cortez, clad in polished steel, the leader of a few hundred weary, mud-spattered but grimly determined adventurers. On the other, approaching you in a litter adorned with quetzal plumes and carried by nobles, is the Emperor of the Mexica. The two most powerful men in this corner of the world are about to meet, and you are the fragile, single point of connection between them. The meeting is a masterpiece of cautious diplomacy. Moctezuma, a tall, slender man with an air of profound, almost melancholy dignity, steps from his litter. Cortez dismounts his horse. They exchange gifts. Cortez offers a necklace of Venetian glass beads, and Moctezuma presents him with a magnificent collar of golden crayfish and jade. Every word they speak passes through you. You take Moctezuma's flowery, almost philosophical Nahuatl and transform it into the direct, businesslike Spanish that Cortez requires. A quirky detail often recounted from this meeting is the attempt by Cortez to give Moctezuma a full-on European embrace, a gesture his attendants quickly blocked, as it was considered sacrilegious to touch the emperor. You likely had to translate that awkward moment of cultural crossed wires. In the days and weeks that follow, as the Spanish are housed in one of the city's grand palaces, you are in constant motion. You are at the center of a swirling vortex of intrigue. You translate the long, complex conversations between Cortés and Moctezuma as they try to understand each other's cosmology, politics, and intentions. Moctezuma, it seems, is wrestling with an ancient prophecy, the return of the bearded god Quetzalcoatl from the east. Cortés, a devout Catholic, is wrestling with his own desire for gold and glory, couching it in the language of saving souls for Christ. You navigate these two immense contradictory belief systems, trying to keep the peace. But the peace is fragile. The city is a powder keg. The Spanish guests in a palace are effectively hostages. They soon turn the tables, placing Moctezuma under a polite but firm house arrest within his own home. You are the one who has to translate this devastating command, softening the steel of the words while conveying their unbreakable intent. You watch as the emperor's authority crumbles and the resentment of his people, particularly his warrior nobility, begins to burn. Then comes the inevitable explosion. In Cortés's absence, one of his captains massacres thousands of unarmed Mexican nobles during a religious festival. The city erupts in furious rebellion. The Spanish, barricaded in their palace, are now under siege. When Moctezuma tries to calm his people from a rooftop, he is struck down and killed. Whether by a Spanish blade or a stone from his own subjects, is a fact that historians still and will forever debate. The old world has cracked wide open. The Spanish are forced into a desperate, bloody retreat from the city under the cover of night. La noche triste, the night of sorrows. You are there for all of it. During that terrifying retreat across the causeway, weighed down by gold and beset on all sides by enraged Mexican warriors, you somehow survive. You, a handful of other native allies, and a fraction of the Spanish force make it to the mainland. In the aftermath, as Cortés gathers his forces and his native allies for a counterattack, your role is more crucial than ever. You are no longer just a translator. You are a spy master, a diplomat to the wavering allied kingdoms and a symbol. To the Tlaxcalans and other enemies of the Mexica who now form the bulk of Cortés's army, you are the voice of their shared enterprise. The final siege of Tenochtitlan is brutal and protracted. The Spanish cut the causeways and bring warships, built in sections and reassembled at the lakeside, to bear on the island city. You are not a warrior, but you are instrumental in the campaign, managing the delicate and often fractious relationships between Cortés and his thousands of indigenous allies. When the city finally falls, its last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, captured, you stand with the victors amidst the ruins of a civilization. The beautiful metropolis is now a landscape of rubble, smoke, and death. You have survived. More than survived, you have triumphed. In the new world that rises from these ashes, you are granted a position of immense status. Cortés, acknowledging his debt to you, grants you a large estate and arranges a marriage for you. Not to a common soldier, but to another conquistador, a nobleman named Juan Jaramillo. Your final years are lived in comfort and wealth, a life unimaginable for the slave girl you once were. You are Doña Marina, a respected lady of the new Spanish colony. You have a daughter. You are a landowner. But your place in history remains profoundly ambiguous. Are you the ultimate survivor, a woman who used her prodigious gifts to navigate an apocalypse and emerge on top? Are you the mother of a new, mixed-race civilization? Or are you the great traitor, the woman who sold out a continent for a string of glass beads and a place at the conqueror's side. As you drift off to sleep, let the answer remain complex. Picture yourself not as a statue, cast in the simple bronze of heroism or treachery, but as a person, standing in the smoke between two burning worlds, making 1,000 impossible choices, armed with nothing but your voice. You, the key who opened the door to a new and terrible age, your name forever a whisper on the wind, a legend in smoke and jade.